over to Carolyn, who is chairing our meeting this morning.
Thank you very much. I'd like to call the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning Board meeting to order. This meeting is being live streamed. If you are attending the meeting remotely as permitted under the Governor's Disaster Declaration, please be sure to mute and unmute yourself to speak. To ensure a transparent and open meeting as possible, the meeting materials were posted 1 week in advance. A recording of this meeting will be provided and linked on our website, and all votes will be taken by roll call. I'll ask our Executive Director, Erin Alamon, to call the roll.
Thank you. Mayor Bennett, Frank Beal, President Brawley.
Here.
Mayor Darch.
Here.
Paul Goodrich. Jim Healy.
Present.
Nina Idamudia.
Here.
Mayor Noak.
Here.
President Reinbold. Mayor Rodering.
Here.
Carolyn Schofield. Here. Ann Sheehan.
Here.
Matt Walsh. Diane Williams. Leanne Redden.
Here.
And Dr. Mohammadian.
I'm here. I'm on my way. Probably I'll be walking in 5 minutes. But I'm not. Sure.
We do have a quorum, and this is our annual joint meeting, so I'm going to turn it over to Director Redden.
Morning, everyone. I'll probably forget to keep holding this button down, but so I'd like to call the meeting to order of the MPO Policy Committee. Erin, can you also call the roll?
Thank you. If the appointed member is not in attendance, if the alternate could please identify themselves, I will call the organization, followed by the member's name, but suggested if you're an alternate, please identify yourself. IDOT Secretary Osman. Mike Vanderhoff, are you present? CDOT.
Kevin O'Malley on behalf of Commissioner Biaggi.
Thank you. Cmap Frank Beal. Cmap President Brawley. Here. CTA.
Mayor Noak here for Cmap.
Oh. CTA.
Mike Connolly here for Dorval Carter Jr.
Thank you. Cook County.
So Jesse Elam here. Superintendent Sis Killen should be coming a little bit later in person.
Council of Mayors, Mayor Schilke.
Mayor Schilke here.
DuPage County.
This is Chris Snyder, Director of Transportation, on behalf of Chairman Cronin.
FHWA.
Good morning, Dave Snyder here for FHWA.
Thank you. FTA.
Tony Greep, representing Regional Administrator Kelly Brookins.
Thank you. Illinois State Toll Highway Authority. Kane County.
Tom Rickard here representing Chairman Barrow.
Thank you. Kendall County. I believe Chair Greider is on his way. Lake County.
Good morning. Kevin Carrier with Lake County DOT representing Chair Hart.
Thank you. McHenry County.
Peter Austin representing Chairman Bueller.
Thank you. Metra.
David Kralik representing Jim Jerwinski.
Pace.
Rick Kwasniewski with Pace.
Thank you. RTA.
Leanne Redden.
Will County.
Jennifer Bertino Tarrant.
Thank you. Class 1 Railroads. We do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. On to item 2, agenda changes and announcements. I'd just like to welcome everyone. It's very nice to be here in this historic place in person. So thank you to Amtrak for hosting us. And I'm going to turn it over to Erin as she has a few announcements on behalf of the Cmap board.
Thank you so much. First, I don't know if he's here with us today, but I wanted to congratulate Dave Bennett from the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus on his retirement. We've enjoyed working with the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus over the years in partnership on numerous projects, committees. We wish Dave the best. I also wanted to just let folks know that they have a newly appointed executive director, Neil James. Neil comes to Cmap, or comes to the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus after serving as the executive director of the West Cook County Solid Waste Agency for nearly 8 years. I know he has strong relationships across the region. We're excited to continue to work with the Metropolitan's Mayor's Caucus and continue to be co-located with them in our offices. With that, let me turn it over to Lee.
And the MPO Policy Committee also has a new member. Cassandra Rouse will serve as the MPO representative for the Tollway. Cassandra has worked for the Tollway for more than a decade and was appointed as Executive Director back in August. So this is also the last meeting of our Kendall County Chair, Scott Grider. Is he joining us?
He'll be joining us shortly,
Okay,
so we can
okay.
thank him.
And we'll wish him all the best, but I guess we can redo that when if he makes it to the meeting, as he pursues new opportunities and new endeavors. So, thanks to him.
Okay, we'd like to move on to the approval of minutes. So for the Cmap board minutes from September 14th, 2022, I would like to entertain a motion to approve the Cmap board minutes.
So moved, Reinbold. Second.
Thank you. Second, Beal? And I'll-
I'm sorry. And then there's also, the June ones also? Never mind. Okay. So Aaron, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Mayor Bennett? Frank Beal?
Yes.
President Brawley?
Yes.
Mayor Darch?
Yes.
Paul Goodrich? Jim Healy?
Aye.
Ina Itamudia? Mayor Noak?
Aye.
President Reinbold?
Yes.
Mayor Rodering?
I was absent, so I'm present.
Thank you. Stephen Schaefer?
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield?
Yes.
Ann Sheehan?
Yes.
Matt Walsh? And Diane Williams. Motion carries.
And now I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes from the June 9th, 2022 meeting. Please state your name for the motion purposes.
Connolly moved.
Thank you, Mike. Do we have a second?
O'Malley, second.
Second by CDOT. Thank you. Get back in practice here. All right, I'll go ahead and call the roll. IDOT? CDOT?
Yeah, Mike,
Oh, thank you, Mike.
Mike Vander. Yeah, aye.
Aye.
CMAP Beal?
Aye.
CMAP Raleigh?
Yes.
CTA?
Yes.
Cook County?
Yes.
Council of Mayors?
Yes.
DuPage County?
Yes.
Illinois State Toll Highway Authority? King County?
Yes.
Kendall County? Lake County?
Yes.
McHenry County?
Yes.
Metra?
Yes.
Pace? RTA?
Yes.
And Will County? Thank you. Motion carries. On to my report for today. I just wanted to echo what both Leanne and Carolyn said. Thank you so much for joining us in person here today for our annual joint meeting, and thanks to those who are joining us virtually. I also want to give thanks to Amtrak for graciously allowing us to use their space here. It's a beautiful historic room, and we are just thrilled to be in this magnificent space. It's great to see you all in person. It really put my memory to the test as to whether or not I could identify without the small border around you. But a lot has changed over the past couple of years. I know that we've all sort of experienced this, the pandemic in many different ways, our travel in many different ways, our careers and our jobs have changed in many different ways. But there is a lot of opportunity in front of us, especially related to our transportation infrastructure with the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, with the state's historic investment in their Rebuild Illinois Capital program. You know, we have a lot of work ahead of us, and I think we have a lot of work working together in order to make sure that we're successful here. So thanks to last year's passage of the new federal infrastructure bill, IDOT has added $4 billion to its $34.6 billion multi-year program for the next 6 years. You know, and I think we've done a lot of work as agencies to change the way we're engaging the public around projects, thinking about renewed focus on climate and resiliency, equity, accessibility, safety, and so much more. I just wanted to provide some update on our committees. Our long-range comprehensive plan is 30 years, and to help us focus our work and commit to what we can deliver in that short-term window, 4 to 5 years, you know, we went through a thoughtful process to develop a strategic direction, right? What can Cmap really advance in the 2050 plan effectively over the next few years? We moved to a new committee structure earlier this year that better aligns with our strategic direction, our focus on transportation, the regional economy, and climate with some specific objectives. So this restructuring really allows us to have sort of the policy level here, the advisory level, and the working level committees really work in close concert as we develop and implement the activities. The newly created Regional Economy Committee and the Climate Committee met 3 times this past year, and we'll meet again next month for a total of 4 times this year. And we really want to bring their work, their ideas, their thoughts here to the board, and plan to do so through annual reporting. All of our committees have provided strategic direction and valuable input into our approaches, and thinking about how we can better articulate our work and make it more meaningful for stakeholders across the region. As a reminder, the committees are comprised of about 20 members representing a variety of subject matters and experts and local stakeholders as well. The Transportation Committee has spent a lot of time focused on learning more about the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and discussing the many funding opportunities, including joint grant applications under the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. We've talked about the collaborative process underway to build consensus around our most competitive regional projects for the infrastructure bill's opportunities in front of us. Earlier this year, the MPO Policy Committee asked Cmap to convene an advisory group comprised of Transportation Committee members to discuss how we can strategically work together to advance our partners, make sure that we're making best use of everyone's time, and think about the new influx of federal funds. So the committee and this advisory committee has met 3 times over the summer and is compiling a memo of recommendations that will be presented to the Transportation Committee for discussion and endorsement at their November meeting. The advisory committee discussed what working groups might be needed for IIJA project coordination, how working groups, subcommittees, and committees should report to each other, how the Transportation Committee can create more opportunities to discuss policy and strategy at their meetings. So we're excited to report back on that, but there will be more discussion at our Transportation Committee in November. So there's lots of progress happening on a whole bunch of fronts that we have here. We're at a turning point in our region with tremendous opportunities for funding and a shared commitment to work together. I just wanted to highlight a note from Arlene Kohler, who recently said about how to be successful as we pursue infrastructure funds from the federal bill. She said, "A regional approach will put you ahead, and that's what makes a difference." And speaking of Arlene, I just wanted to take a moment and thank her. I know she's not here today. She retired at the end of last month, but thank her for all of her contributions to Illinois, dedicating more than 20 years of her career at FHWA and 13 at IDOT before that. So thank you again, and thanks to our partners at FHWA for always being great advocates for our work here in the region. So on the agenda today, just wanted to give you a quick preview of what you'll see. Staff will provide an overview of the ON2 2050 plan update process and findings. You have a printout of that report at your seats here this morning, and there are some for the audience members as well. Before taking action on the update, I hope to engage you all in a discussion about where you think we should go from here as we embark on the next regional plan. As a reminder, this update meets our federal plan requirements here. The purpose really is to update our data and information around socioeconomics, around our regional economy, population projections, and thinking about the funds that are available and how we're going to expend those funds moving forward. So there's a lot more in-depth work to be done as we look to the next long-range plan, 2060, of what name and title, I'm not quite sure yet. But there are a lot of challenges, and I think there are a lot of new things that we're going to need to be doing just given the state that we are in today and sort of the differences and changes that have occurred over the past few years. So that is it for my director's report. I'm going to keep moving on here. I have promised that I would give the Cmap board report over the next couple for the MPO, which is traditionally held quarterly, whereas our board meets monthly here. So at the board meeting in June and September meetings, we continued our review and discussion of the 2 priority areas that we'll be focusing on today, the ON2 2050 update, the mobility recovery work that you've heard about. In September, our first in-person meeting in 2 years was at our new space in the old post office, where we received an update from the Regional Economy Committee, and it's also included in the annual report from our committees. With that, I think I'll turn it over to, happy to answer questions. Hearing none, happy to turn it over to Mayor Schilke for the Council of Mayors report.
Thank you, Aaron. Since the last MPO Policy Committee meeting, the Council of Mayors Executive Committee has met twice. At the July 19th, 2022 meeting, the Council of Mayors Executive Committee received updates from Cmap's Executive Director, the STP Project Selection Committee, and IDOT's Bureau of Local Roads. Staff then provided an overview of Cmap's ongoing mobility recovery work and discussed their draft recommendations. This overview was followed by a presentation of the regional greenhouse gas emissions inventory and related local emissions summaries. The committee heard an update on the work of the local government network team. The committee then received a brief update from Cmap's legislative affairs team. At the September 13th, 2022 meeting, the Council of Mayors Executive Committee received again updates from the Cmap, the STP Project Selection Committee, and the IDOT Bureau of Roads. The committee then presented an overview of Cmap's Making It Better plan. This plan will assist municipalities across the region to improve accessibility and comply with the Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Next, RTA staff walked the committee through the RTA strategic plan for 2023's agenda for advocacy and action. Finally, the committee received an overview from the Cmap Legislative Affairs team regarding Cmap's federal and state focuses to align with core area and leverage new opportunities available. Our next meeting is scheduled for January of 2023. And that is the report of the Council of Mayors. And if anybody has any questions, I certainly would be pleased to honor with them. I just want to make the observation, this isn't part of the, is that I, being the chairman of the Council of Mayors, I have been very, very impressed with the quality of work and support we have gotten from the Cmap staff. They have been very, very responsive, informative, and have done everything they possibly can to kind of alert us and some of our individual councils when something is happening that they thought we should make sure we had the information to hold on to. So I just want to say that through a very difficult time in the history of the United States and the history of the region, Cmap staff has really risen to the occasion and stepped forward and done some outstanding work in helping this region hold on to its future, hold on to its money, and more importantly, hold on to the great vision that I think we have put together for what Chicagoland will look like in the future. And so I just want to go on record as making that observation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Schilke. At this time of the consideration of the MPO, we would like to wait and delay the approval of the vice chair for the election of the MPO Policy Committee until Sis Killen arrives. If there's no concerns, we'll skip ahead.
Yeah, I'm okay with that. If the MPO members are okay with that, we'll come back to it. Pete's like, no. Okay, so then we'll jump down to item 5.02, the meeting schedule for the MPO. And it was in your packets, a link to that was in your packets. I will entertain a motion to approve the 2023 MPO Policy Committee meeting schedule. Rick, and a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Craig. All those in favor?
We actually have to do the roll call because of the hybrid
virtual nature of this.
Thank you. No worries. All right, so moved by Chair Kwasniewski and second by Metra. IDOT?
Aye.
CDOT?
Aye.
Cmap Beal?
Aye.
Cmap Brawley?
Aye.
CTA?
Yes.
Cook County? Council of Mayors?
Aye.
DuPage County?
Aye.
Illinois State Toll Highway Authority? Kane County?
Aye.
Kendall County? Lake County?
Aye.
McHenry County?
Yes.
Metra?
Yes.
Pace?
Yes.
RTA?
Yes.
Will County? Motion carries.
So next is item 5.03, the ON to 2050 plan update, and I'd like to invite Aaron and Elizabeth Scott to present the ON to 2050 plan update.
Thank you. I think Elizabeth Scott is going to start with a little bit of overview here, but and I'll follow up on the end.
Okay. Can you all hear me? Is this working?
Yep.
Okay, great, thank you. Hi, good morning, everyone. It's great to be here with you in this historic room, having a conversation about the regional plan. It was 1 year and 1 day ago today that we adopted Onto 2050, the region's comprehensive plan. You all may remember that that day was also a rainy day in Millennium Park. So it's nice to be here with you talking about the statutorily required updates to that plan that we need to make to continue to move the region forward with its transportation projects. And so a reminder, we have been talking to you all about this a lot over the last year. So the Cmap staff have been working to update Onto 2050 since 2021. And we've been talking with the MPO, the board, Transportation Committee, and other stakeholder groups sort of since the middle of last year. Key kind of milestone points to remind you all of is that we came to you with a draft of the plan in June for discussion before the plan update went out for public comment for a period through the summer, June through August. We also had roundtables, focus groups. We took written comment and held a public hearing. All of this was incorporated together into the package of the plan update to Onto 2050, which is here for you today. And one thing I'll also note is that at its September meeting, the Transportation Committee sent forward the plan update to all of you to consider for adoption. And so just a reminder of what exactly this exercise has been and what it's intended to be. Rather than re-examining all of the policies that the region adopted and developed and adopted in Onto 2050, we held many of those policies steady and instead spent our time doing some quantitative exercises to update our understanding of employment and jobs in the region, our quantitative assessments of transportation investments, and then we also have spent some time looking back over all that we've achieved in terms of, as a region, in terms of implementing Onto 2050 in the last 4 years. And together, this whole process has reaffirmed for us the enduring importance of the principles of Onto 2050, inclusive growth, resilience, and prioritized investment. You'll see in the plan update summary before you, we spend some time talking about those principles in context of the experience of the last 4 years, which we all know has been unexpected and difficult, but has also, I think, confirmed in many ways that the values that are expressed in Onto 2050 continue to be the right ones for the region. However, we have to occasionally look at some of these elements and update them, which we've done in the plan update that we brought to you today. So just a reminder of what all was done. And I want to take a minute to say that this work was really 10 projects carried out by dozens of staff over the last 2 years. So even though this wasn't the 3-year, 100,000 plus people engaged effort of Onto 2050, it was still a major effort for Cmap and the staff, and just to congratulate them for getting it done, I think quite well. So the things that we've been working on include, kind of as I mentioned, doing a new forecast of regional employment and population. This helps us update our travel model so that we can make good assessments of what the impacts of our investments may be in the future. We take a look at the federal targets that we need to set, re-look at the performance of our transportation system overall, update the indicators that we identified in Onto 2050. We also look at the financial plan for the transportation, for transportation over the plan horizon. So that's the entire budget that we have from now to 2050. We also, as required, have updated the TIP. We've done a new conformity analysis, done some public and stakeholder engagement, wrote all of this up, and then sort of the centerpiece of this whole effort is the review of the regionally significant projects list in the region, which we have also done, identifying 71 projects to put forward in this plan, many of which are old, but some of which are new. And so just to sit with a couple of these important pieces for a minute here, we're talking about transportation expenditures over $520 billion in the next 28 years. And one piece that's important to know is that 89% of these resources will go to operating, maintaining, and improving the system that we have today. The remaining 11% are split between system enhancements, so that's things like bike ped investments, ITS investments, sort of smaller scale relative to some road projects, investments that we still know need to happen to make our transportation system what it needs to be. And then finally, we have new capacity for transit and new capacity for road, together making up only 4% of the overall $526 billion anticipated. Next slide. And so, thinking about all of the different components of the plan update, we also received from the implementers either confirmation that projects that were previously submitted, they want to continue forward with keeping them in the plan, or there's an opportunity for projects to drop off or new projects to be identified that have reached the point in their development where it makes sense for them to be included in the regional plan. So we take time through this process to think about how the projects that are submitted can help us make capital investments in our transit system, expressways, and arterials. We use a performance-based process where we assess indicators for each one of the projects submitted so we can understand the benefits that it's delivering to the region and try to balance different aspects of what we get from the things that we choose to build. We also look at the performance of the whole set overall, and then, yeah, you can go to the next slide. And here's just a picture. You'll see in the plan summary booklet that you have, the bigger version of this, if you want to look more closely at it. It's also got the project names on the side, if that's of interest. But we wanted to share the map with you here so you could see that the regionally significant projects put forward in this plan update really cover the entirety of our region and will be stretched across transit projects, expressway projects, and more local arterial projects. And so, yes, there's a note here. It's on page 23 and 24 if you want to take a closer look at that map. And then finally, one more piece I wanted to raise while we're talking about the plan update is some of the things that we heard from people, from you all and other people that we were talking to throughout this process. We got over 500 pieces of public comment, ranging from, I guess, we also got a lot of social media engagement. We cataloged all of this, and there were a few themes that really rose to the top in terms of what we heard from the public and from the stakeholders, both about this plan update itself, but even more than that, people wanted to share with us where they kind of thought the region should go. And we tend to be very focused on that kind of feedback so that we can have a better understanding of how Cmap can support that. And so just a few things we heard were that people are concerned about the impact of roadway expansions on climate mitigation efforts. People are very concerned about transportation system safety and accessibility, whether that is safety on our roadways. As I'm sure everyone in this room knows, over 700 people were killed on our roads in the region last year, so we have a safety crisis that, I think is front of mind for everyone. And that definitely came through, but, also sort of day-to-day safety on our transit system and people's experience of the transportation system broadly as things sort of get back to normal if there is no one knows if there's normal anymore. Whatever this is, it's different from before, but it's not the same as before. You get my meaning. Anyway, we also heard from many of our partners about the need to transparently prioritize scarce public resources, including Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act funding, which, I know Aaron has spoken with you all about before. We also heard a lot of support for more resources to promote active modes, so walking, biking, rolling, transit, to promote those aspects of our transportation system. And then finally, we heard some feedback about the need to preserve farmland and consider more centrally development at the edge of the region. And so that's this word cloud of the comments that we received. You can see that transportation, equity, region projects, worsening, all pop out at us. And we sit with these things and consider them very seriously while we do the technical activities that we need to do, but also as we begin to scope the successor plan to On to 2050, which will guide where the region will go over the next 4 years from now. 4 years from today-ish, we'll be looking to adopt that plan, which will set out a new blueprint for the future. So we want to spend a little bit of time thinking about those next steps as well, which this is the part of our conversation Aaron will lead.
Great. Well, thank you, Elizabeth, and I want to echo Elizabeth's thanks to our team. It did take many of our team touching the 9 projects that came together comprehensively to make this plan update. So thanks to our team. Thanks to many of you, too, because without you and your technical staff and expertise, we wouldn't be where we are. I think we lean on your expertise and your understanding of infrastructure projects across the region and what it means, and really influences, those discussions really influence how we come to consensus here. There were a couple areas that Elizabeth mentioned that as we think about before we ask for your approval today, I would be remiss if I didn't have this many smart people in one room and ask for your input and guidance. There were a couple areas that came up throughout the course of the plan. One Elizabeth alluded to was really related to farmland preservation across the region. And I think beyond farmland preservation, just conservation of our precious resources, our wetlands, our natural resources, the forest preserves that we have. That was one area of discussion I thought would be really helpful for us and our team to hear from you all today. Just as development continues across our region, what should we be thinking about for the next long-range plan, and how does our role as the Regional Land Use and Transportation Agency, how should we be considering what our role might be in the next long-range plan update? Just looking for some thoughts and guidance from you all.
Aaron, this is Chris Snyder, DuPage County. You hear me?
Yep, thanks, Chris.
Yeah. I just would say, something I've gotten heavily involved in recent months with freight and a railroad merger. I know Cmap has done a lot on the freight side, and I think in the next plan, freight, logistics, warehousing, those types of land uses, but how we're accommodating those in our plan to get things more efficiently moved from town to town and across the country. I would suggest that be an emphasis area.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate that. And I know, too, as we think about freight and continued land use around freight activities, there are also a number of equity considerations, whether it's air quality, whether it's noise in communities, but freight is a huge economic driver of our region, and really critical that we find a way to balance the pros with the cons, too. I know many of your agencies are working on freight. Other thoughts related to freight? Or anything else? Sorry.
Yeah, I want to be careful because this is Tom Ricker from Kane County. I'm not an expert on the agricultural side of things, but very important to Kane County. I know that we have an agricultural committee of the county board. It's a primary focus for us, and the preservation of farmland is also very critical for us. And so that's about as good as I can do for that area, and hopefully there's a stronger voice at a future meeting.
Add to that as well, being from McHenry County, I'll tap in because Kane and McHenry are probably two of the strongest ones as relating to agricultural land. And I think it's an opportunity to really unite the region. And, I think I've mentioned it before, sometimes we're forgotten about on the outskirts of the region. So I do think that embracing the agricultural piece and really engaging the Farm Bureau potentially and those other entities that are for the preservation of, in particular, farmland, or the conservation districts as well, if you're looking for the open space one, but really engaging, and it's an opportunity to unite the whole region around that, so.
Thank you.
Aaron, hi. Well, I think since we, amalgamation of combination of Cmap and NIPSI, haven't had really moved toward having a comprehensive land use plan. We have had a transportation plan, but land use, even before that, once NIPSI was here, we moved to that, instead of using models, we had that paint the city, we just have actually just because of the different villages, different cities want actually just to have control over the land use. But I think the technology is out there now. We have the tools that we can have a comprehensive land use plan for the region, and it's probably that's time to start thinking about it.
Aaron, it's Mayor Noak.
Mayor Noak, would you mind for us and for all of the folks online, if you are making comment, if you wouldn't mind turning on your cameras, it'd be helpful for.
Yeah, I'm having a bad connection, so we're going to have to not do that for the moment. I just want to caution again, local land use is ultimately and should continue to be a local decision. Our guidance and ideas and concepts and help and assistance is definitely an area where we can continue to be strong, but ultimately local land use is a local decision.
Thanks for that. I think that was helpful to get us started. I think the other area that we really had quite a bit of engagement around from the public is really greenhouse gas mitigation and climate, and how our land use decisions and our transportation decisions could help us stave off the worst of the greenhouse gas increases, especially just given the fact that transportation sector is about 30% of the greenhouse gas emissions here in the region. And while over the past 10 years or so, we've seen greenhouse gas emissions go down by about 9%, if we're going to meet the goals of the 2050 plan, we'll need to be reducing greenhouse gas emissions by about 5% per year every year until 2050 in order to get to the Paris Climate Accord goal. So how are your agencies or how are your organizations thinking about greenhouse gases, and what should we be thinking about helping support you do to help us all collectively have a stronger approach to reducing greenhouse gases?
Hi, this is Nina Idamudia. Well, the city of Chicago did a climate action plan that I think a lot of our colleagues or people around the region should look at in order to think of some ideas and concrete ways in which they can make steps towards reducing climate. I think back to the bigger point, having land use and comprehensive plans with land use messaging in them in Illinois, having that in my personal good way to municipalities having to actually articulate and track their comes to the protection of agricultural land and emissions. If every city had to do a comprehensive plan and actually write out their plan, then we would have something to hold all of us accountable to. Right now, all of our cities are kind of doing them one-off, depending on if there's a political will from the leadership to do so. And so I think, having those plans, having concrete, transparent recommendations in them, and then actually tracking them is where in the direction that we need to go in order for our constituents to hold us all accountable to the goals that we say we want, but aren't actually putting our budgets and resources behind the values that we're spitting out. So that would be one way that I would say we could be looking at this particular topic about climate change and emissions, but then also, honestly, any other topic that we have. I just don't think there's one formal way for municipalities to actually have to do this together.
And I'll add that the City of Chicago entered into a long-term contract that beginning in 2025, 100% of our electricity consumption will be renewable. We're standing up a solar field in downstate Illinois in partnership with a provider, and I think that's a very direct, finite step in the right direction.
This is also, can I?
Yeah.
Stephen Schaefer from representing City of Chicago. Some other thoughts in terms of how to mitigate greenhouse gas emissions, just really being clear about the potential impact of interventions, especially when you start to scale regionally and across individual units of government. So what could a coordinated effort to tackle greenhouse gas emissions look like across the various entities represented here on the board, and to the effect that this scales beyond, for instance, the city or a specific county, just really getting clear on that bottom line of X intervention could actually drive down GHGs by Y amount in this region. Along with that, being able to list off, here are possible interventions and kind of their expected impact, so that that priority list is surfaced and clear to different members of this board and Cmap staff and kind of the broader region generally. And then I think this actually relates back to the land use question as well, but just really getting clear about what values and principles you're approaching, what it means to successfully reduce GHG emissions or to successfully develop land, really thinking about who is impacted by the effects of these developments or crises, right? So when you think about climate change, centering impacted communities, making sure that they're represented at different parts of the process. I know Cmap looked at different engagement processes, so just being really clear who within the city or who within the region would bear the greatest burden of climate change, and making sure that their attendance is actually baked into this process and co-creating the strategy there. And then the last thought for me is really thinking about just the different indicators that advance this. So thinking about not just the bottom line of GHG emissions, right, but how do you actually make equity a co-equal goal of that as part of the final definition?
I don't want to put the transit guys on the spot, but I mean, I'll just make an overarching statement because the three operators have got plans in place to specifically on a sort of macro level deal with climate change, as well as something micro, but I mean in terms of fleet modification and improvements. You know, they've got plans that they can speak to more specifically, but I think the transit system, doubling down within the transit system as a whole is the best way, one of the best ways for our region from a transportation side, regardless of what they do with their fleets, is the best way to putting more people on buses and trains is actually one of the better impact features, but they can speak to more specifically their plans and
Chair Kwasniewski.
Sure. Hopefully I'm operating this okay. So from a pace perspective, we're obviously committed to go to zero emissions by 2040. We got our first electric bus this past year. We've got 20 more in order to be in early next year. We're completing an analysis of what infrastructure improvements that we need to make for all of our garages. As we're moving forward with anything new, we're incorporating electrification into that as well. So, you know, we're really committed to doing that. We're also going to try to partner with some of the smaller transit agencies downstate for some smaller vehicles that we use for ADA paratransit and, you know, also like van pooling and so forth, so that, you know, we can pool together and actually help them out who maybe don't order as many buses potentially as we do. So, and our actual report should be done, I would think, within the next 30 to 60 days. And that gives us like a rollout plan for the infrastructure improvements that need to be made.
Thanks.
I would just echo, so David Kralik from Metro, I would just echo, we have similar plans in place. We've taken, approved our first battery electric conversion of locomotives on the rail side. The technology is not quite as far advanced as on the bus side, so we are a little bit behind our bus brethren. But we are continuing to move forward in this. And I think just really to echo what Leanne said, the biggest thing that transit can do and that the region can do in terms of using transit to achieve greenhouse gas reduction is to further the goals of Onto 2050 in shifting modes of travelers to transit away from other pieces. That is not just a transit piece, that is clearly a strong land use connection, and having the right land use to support that. It all needs to come together in order for transit to be able to provide that source of cleaner transportation.
Thanks, Dave.
So if
Mike?
I can, Aaron, if you mind, I also will echo my.
Could you pull the mic?
I'll echo my colleagues about electrification of the fleet and the change in greenhouse gas that we can accomplish within our transit agencies themselves. Those are important. You don't want to downplay those, but I think the statement that's already been made is that one of the biggest ways that we as a region could change our greenhouse gas emissions is to shift people from highway use or automobile use into transit use. And I don't want to overplay that, but I think it's very, very important for us as an agency, as CTA as an agency, but all of our agencies together banded into this group, looking at things from a regional standpoint. We heard, you heard, all of you heard from our advocates and from our citizens here that they feel that we need to be doing more. And I'm going to suggest that we've got a tip conformity item coming up on the agenda, and we'll vote on that, and we'll say, yes, we're in conformity. But what if we go beyond conformity? We actually make positive action with regard to our ability to reduce emissions in this area. And the real way to do that is to shift trips from private automobiles into public transit of all types all across the region. So I don't want to drop that. I think it's an important theme.
I asked. No, and I think, again, all of these insights are really helpful, I think, for all of us to hear as we think about solving for a better future. So I appreciate sharing. Chairman Greider.
Forgive me, are we on 502 or 503?
On. Sorry.
Are we updating the plan? Pardon? 503? 503. So I guess I would be just looking, is this the time to comment on the RSP?
Yes.
So from Kendall County's perspective, grateful to see a couple of items in here that are important arterial items for us, numbers 166, 159. One of the things that I'm looking at, one of my mayors straight across from me here, that our mayors are working hard on is the metro extension. And I understand that, you know, ridership and all the things that we've talked about with respect to the metro ridership, but that's something that I think that we'd like to see be part of this plan, because that is something that they're working very hard on to try to obtain funding for and to try to make that feasible.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Greider. I know we've had lots of conversations with your staff about the proposed metro extension, and it is not in this plan, but I know as the funding comes forth for further study, and there's a better scope in place, it's something that we would certainly consider evaluating for the process.
Well, can I add something?
Sure.
It's not just metro extension. If you look at actually just the sources of greenhouse, first of all, not all the greenhouse gas emission comes from transportation, but at least we can control the transportation portion, at least in this committee. We're going to be talking about transportation portion. The majority of them comes from the commute. And as actually my colleague from CTA mentioned, that the idea should be trying to shift people from cars to transit. But look at the budgets that we are looking at the expenditure allocation, actually we just saw. The amount of budget allocated for transit operation is almost equal to roadway operation, and almost transit maintenance and improvement is pretty much almost very close to what we have for roadway maintenance. But then look at the projects that we have in this map. Majority of transit projects are in Chicago, while the greenhouse emission generated by commuters that are coming from the actually just all the counties. So we need to find, actually, we need to have projects to improve accessibility to Metro. It's not just extending Metro. We need to actually just provide access to that. I'm just living actually myself in south side of Naperville. There is no way for me to use Metro because of the difficulty of access. And that's the problem that needs to be solved. And I don't see that in any of these projects here.
All right, thank you. Oh, Anne.
I just wanted to add that, you know, everyone has really aggressive plans, and there's certainly a lot of funding available through IIJA and other sources, but I really feel it's really just a drop in the ocean of the need. And so just as, you know, to underscore what Stefan was saying, just thinking about our values and principles, and ensuring that we're promoting and prioritizing projects that have the greatest regional impact, and really further our efforts in this area, I think would be great as we move this along. And I know you guys are working hard on that, so.
Thank you. All right. Anybody online before we move forward?
So I will entertain a motion from the Cmap board to approve the On to 2050 plan update. And if you could please state your name when you make the motion in a second.
Darch motion.
Matt Walsh, second.
Thank you. Aaron, will you please, any other discussion? Aaron, will you please call the roll?
Thank you. Mayor Bennett? Frank Beal?
Aye.
President Brawley?
Yes.
Mayor Darch?
Yes.
Paul Goodrich? Jim Healy?
Aye.
Nina Itamudia? Mayor Noak?
Aye.
President Reinbold?
Yes.
Mayor Rodering?
Aye.
Stefan Schaefer?
Yes.
Carolyn Schofield? Ann Sheehan?
Yes.
Matt Walsh?
Yes.
And Diane Williams.
Yes.
Motion carries.
And now we'll do the same for the MPO. So looking for a motion and a second to approve the 2050 plan update.
Motion by Mayor Shelkey to approve.
I'll second the mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you. Second by Chairman Greider. IDOT?
Aye.
CDOT?
Aye.
Cmap Beal?
Aye.
Cmap Brawley?
Yes.
CTA?
Yes.
Cook County? Council of Mayors?
Yes.
Aye.
Sorry, got excited. So we got an aye from Will County. Cook County? Yes. Okay, thank you. DuPage County?
Aye.
Illinois State Toll Highway Authority? Kane County?
Aye.
Kendall County?
Aye.
Lake County?
Aye.
McHenry County?
Yes.
Metra?
Yes.
Pace?
Yes.
RTA?
Yes.
Will County? Thank you. Motion carries. With that, I think we'd like to move back to item 5.01, election of the MPO Policy Committee Vice Chair.
And actually, with your indulgence, before that, I would just like to formally recognize Chairman Greider for joining us here in person. And just to, for the record, note that we did thank you for your service since you're stepping off the MPO. We did that early in the meeting, but I just wanted to formally recognize that. And so, with that, I will move to item 5.01.
Yes, 5.01, and I think Mayor Schilke was going to make the recommendation.
Ms. Schilke, do you have that report for from the nominating committee?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I've been given a little report here to read. I've served on this nominating committee for a number of years, so it's kind of old hat here for me, I guess. Per the MPO Policy Committee bylaws, each year during June, after the notice to the membership and the call of the agenda of a particular meeting, the chairman shall appoint a subcommittee of 5 members of the MPO Policy Committee to nominate at a meeting in October the name of a candidate for the office of Vice Chair of the MPO Policy Committee for the following year. Past practices have been that the Vice Chair serves 2 consecutive terms. In 2020, The nominating committee recommended Leon Redden, Executive Director of the Regional Transportation Authority, to serve as vice chairman for the 2021, and again, nominating committee appointed Ms. Redden for 2022. We would like to thank Leon Redden for her years of service and her many contributions to this committee and across the region. At the August 29, 2022 meeting, the MPO nominating subcommittee reviewed the names of candidates for the office of vice chair of the MPO Policy Committee. The subcommittee presented the following candidate to the MPO Policy Committee for consideration. Vice chair is Jennifer Sis Killen. The nominating group believes that this individual is representative of the needs of the committee. And so therefore I would make make this presentation and make the motion for the approval of Jennifer Siskillen to be the new MPO Policy Committee Vice Chairman.
Could I second that? Is that break protocol?
Second.
Great, Frank Beal. Any discussion? I'll go ahead and call the roll. IDOT?
Aye.
CDOT?
Aye.
Cmap Beal?
Aye.
Cmap Raleigh?
Yes.
CTA?
Yes.
Cook County? Council of Mayors?
Yes.
DuPage County?
Aye.
Illinois State Toll Highway Authority? Kane County?
Aye.
Kendall County?
Aye.
Lake County?
Aye.
Henry County?
Yes.
Metra?
Yes.
Pace?
Yes.
RTA?
Yes.
And Will County? Oh, Will County, yes. Yes, over there too. Thank you, the motion carries. Congratulations, Sis. We're looking forward to working with you as Vice Chair. And thank you to Leanne for the past 2 years, because lots of virtual. 5.04, please.
All right, so I think what we are going to do is take next two items for one vote at the end. There'll be two questions. So we are going to have Karma Dobbs and Russell Petrowiak, present both of those items, and then ask the MPO Policy Committee to take action on them with one vote. So that's items 5.04 and 5.05. So Karma.
All right. Great, good morning. There should be no slides. All right, great, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Just like we have to update our long-range transportation plan every 4 years, the MPO must also update our short-range transportation improvement program, or the TIP. While we mostly think of the TIP as a list of federally funded and regionally significant projects, the TIP document before you this morning is the foundation for that project list. It describes how we conduct the metropolitan planning and programming process in the region, is a tool for collaboration between government agencies, and is a way for the public to track the use of local, state and federal transportation funds in Northeast Illinois. With this update, we have refreshed the discussion of how we've begun to assess progress toward meeting our performance targets and to reflect changes to the plan's regionally significant projects that you just adopted. We've also included updates to the resources available to the region, which have changed significantly from the last TIP in 2018 due to both Rebuild Illinois and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Finally, we've made technical updates to reflect the evolution of our project selection methodologies and our eTIP database functionality, and have updated the work types and fund sources within the TIP. The TIP document was available for public review and comment concurrent with the ONTO 2050 update from June 10th through August 13th. No comments regarding the TIP were received. The Transportation Committee did review the document at their September meeting and recommends approval by the MPO Policy Committee this morning. So I'll let Russell speak on conformity.
Included in your packet today is the ONTO 2050 TIP conformity analysis and TIP amendment 23-01. The Cmap region is in a non-attainment area for ozone. Thus, we are required to demonstrate that the long-range plan, ONTO 2050, and the TIP conform to the motor vehicle emissions budget for our area, through a regional emissions analysis of transportation projects in the TIP, including any new regionally significant projects that are part of the On to 2050 plan update. The regional emissions analysis uses the latest planning assumptions and social economic forecasts that are incorporated in the On to 2050 plan update. Specifically, projects in the TIP subject to air quality analysis requirements demonstrate when modeled that the region does not exceed our motor vehicle emissions budget, which is shown near the end of the memo that was in your packet. As stated in the memo, there were some changes to the information regarding a few regionally significant projects that necessitated redoing the benefits analysis and conformity. At the time we went to rerun conformity, we also were able to incorporate updated information regarding truck trips into the modeling process. While we could have held off using this new information, we decided to use the best information we have available when running our model. The new information led to a slight increase in emissions compared to what had been released for public comment during the summer. The new results, our modeling approach, and how to proceed with the results were discussed at the Tier 2 consultation meeting on September 7th. At that time, it was decided that a supplementary memo that details the modeling changes and shows the new modeling results was sufficient and should be included in the packet that went to the Transportation Committee meeting and to the Cmap Board and MPO Policy Committee. The revised results still show regional emissions that are below the region's motor vehicle emissions budget, which is the requirement to demonstrate conformity in the TIP and for the long-range plan. So at this time, staff requests approval of the On to 2050 plan update and TIP conformity amendment 23-01 as presented, along with the TIP that Kama just presented. With that, Kama and me are available to take any questions you may have.
Are there any questions from the committee? Hearing none, no further discussion.
I'll move approval of both items.
Thanks, Mike Conley, CTA. Do I have a second? Kevin O'Malley.
Thank you. IDOT?
Aye.
CDOT?
Aye.
Cmap Beal?
Yes.
Cmap Raleigh?
Yes.
CTA?
Yes.
Cook County?
Yes.
Council of Mayors?
Yes.
DuPage County?
Yes.
Illinois State Toll Highway Authority? Kane County?
Yes.
Kendall County?
Yes.
Lake County?
Yes.
Henry County?
Yes.
Metra?
Yes.
Pace?
Yes.
RTA?
Yes.
Will County? Motion carries. Back to informational items. So
Keeping track of where we're at here, jumping around. So that's, I get to, do you want me to just keep going? I'm going to change hats now. I'm not wearing my MPO vice chair hat today.
hold on.
And
We actually have 5.06 that needs to be considered. So 5.04 and 5.05
sorry.
were taken together. 5.06 is separate.
No, my bad. All right, 5.06. Kama.
Yeah, sorry, Kama.
All right. Good morning again. As detailed in the memo in your packet, it has been a busy year of program development at the 11 sub-regional councils of mayors and at CDOT. Each of the councils in CDOT held individual calls for projects to be funded in federal fiscal years 2023 through 2027 with their local allocations of STP funds. In response to these calls, over 115 local agencies requested about $670 million from the councils, and CDOT also considered 43 projects requesting over $976 million. Project applications were scored according to each subregion's methodology, and the resulting programs of projects were available for public comment over the summer. The final council and CDOT programs allocate approximately $471 million in federal STP funding over the next 5 fiscal years for 216 new locally sponsored projects. That's in addition to the many projects that continued from the prior programming cycle. Although about 3/4 of the new projects are for road and bridge maintenance and modernization, unlike in the past, there are very few projects that are standalone street resurfacing. Instead, these local programs are investing more in projects to improve safety, to add to, enhance, and repair the bicycle and pedestrian networks, to increase accessibility for all through ADA improvements, to incorporate green infrastructure into projects, and to address the vulnerability of our transportation system. The programs were each incorporated into a series of tip changes linked in the memo in your packet for your review today. As noted in the memo, projects that require conformity determinations are illustrative within these amendments. Also, due to the timing of these changes relative to the changing of the federal fiscal year in October, there are 8 projects within the amendments that have additional funding in the new programs that will be added to the existing projects listed in the memo as part of our next cycle of tip changes in November. In September, the Transportation Committee did review these 12 amendments and recommend your approval today.
Any questions for Cameron? If not, I will entertain a motion on the second tip item for today. Apologies for that earlier, for the FY 2023-27 STP programs in the tip.
Cmap Raleigh, yes.
Thank you. Second? Second.
Second, Mike.
Mike Conley.
Connolly. Great.
And the roll.
Thank you. IDOT?
Aye.
CDOT?
Aye.
CMAP Beal?
Yes.
CMAP Raleigh?
Yes.
CTA?
Yes.
Cook County?
Yes.
Council of Mayors?
Yes.
DuPage County?
Yes.
Illinois State Toll Highway Authority? Kane County?
Yes.
Kendall County?
Aye.
Lake County?
Yes.
McHenry County?
Yes.
Metra?
Yes.
Pace?
Yes.
RTA?
Yes.
Will County? The motion carries. Now, on to informational items. My apologies,
Now we're on
Leanne.
to item 6.01. And as I said, I'm switching to my RTA hat now. And we're going to take a few minutes to update the group on the work that the RTA has been doing for the better part of the last year, and talk about transit's future, I think, is really what we're focusing on here. But an update on both the transit system and where we're at to date, as well as sort of the strategic planning work that we've been undertaking over the past year or so. And I think it's important. Yeah, the mic thing, it's okay. I can hold it down. I'll try to remember to hold the button down. But I think it's important as some context for some future conversation that we're going to have after this and this next agenda item as well. So next slide, please. The transit system, I think all of you know, are operated. We at the RTA are sort of the umbrella organization, and we've got the 3 operators, CTA, Metra, and Pace, and they continue to make a very steady recovery coming out of COVID. But you've probably heard me say this several times, but I think it is worthwhile repeating, that the transit system really did provide significant lifeline during the pandemic. And our data shows that at the time in the heat of the pandemic, those who were riding were essential riders, people of color, residents experiencing low incomes across the entire region. And, we appreciate that the work that the transit operators did through those really tough times, and they were truly heroes, moving heroes around our region. But in close collaboration with the service boards, the RTA specifically has worked to provide stable funding for the transit system to be direct for the last 48 years since sort of the structure that we have has existed. And that's including through the worst of the pandemic. And more specifically, in those recent times, during the pandemic, we led a 3-step recovery effort that allocated over $3 billion to CTA, Metra, and Pace. And that was comprised of the federal COVID relief funds to keep them operating and providing those essential services. This fall, we started to see combined ridership across the entire system surpass 1 million trips on a daily basis, on a weekday basis. So that's a big milestone for the transit system and the recovery. And we're continuing to see those strong numbers. So kudos to the transit operators, but also as businesses are continuing to bring people back to work. That said, we don't need really to tell you guys that, COVID has permanently changed the region as a whole, but also how the transit systems operate across our region. The RTA and our partners have already started adapting through several ways, and including service modifications, new and improved capital projects, fare offerings such as, for example, the Metra $100 monthly pass, and then the complimentary $30 regional connect pass across all 3 operators that they are now piloting. And I think that there's some early indications of signs of change and improvements that they're making. So next slide, please. And more specifically, the RTA and its staff are charged with several critical functions that sustain operations, ensure that capital projects are funded and continue to be delivered and monitored, and that we also manage some specific customer-facing programs that help support riders across the entire region. And those activities have continued to adapt throughout the pandemic, but also provided some key stability to the agencies and their transit operations. So just to give some of you who may not be as intimately familiar as sort of who and what we do on a regular basis, the RTA is the sales taxing authority for the region, and we levy that and have state support and distribute those funds to provide those critical services across the region. Many of our large city peers are also facing, so just I think it's important to understand context. We're not alone in this situation. Anne was at the same conference I was at. We're just back from our national conference, and we are not in a unique situation. We're all recovering in the transit space, cities and regions and transit operations, but we're all working to adapt and change and improve how we do things. But we are facing serious challenges ahead, fiscal challenges specifically. And right now we are stable, but that is largely bolstered by the federal COVID relief funding. But as importantly, the strength of the region's sales tax is really bolstering and supporting the transit system. We'll share a little bit more detail about that from the financial perspective in a second. We also found that timely allocation of the federal relief dollars were critical to the service boards and their ability to plan and continue running their services operations each year. Transit services don't sort of turn on and off like a light switch easily, and we need to help them and support them as they plan their just very practical staffing operations, 3 to 6 months out as a bare minimum. And so we've worked hard, I think, over the last year or so to really ensure that that is possible for them, to give them that stability. Similarly, on the capital construction side, programs aren't stood up overnight. The historic lack of investment that the state had historically seen in the transit space specifically, but also on the highway side, really has presented some challenges for the transit operators from a maintenance perspective as well as a future enhancement and growth perspective. And it's really been challenging, I think, with the sort of getting things into the pipeline for both design and construction. But we at the RTA also, during those drier times, did a lot to shore up their funding by floating bonds and supporting them as while we were waiting for what became Rebuild Illinois. Rebuild Illinois and now the Infrastructure Investment and Job Act that's already been mentioned here today has ensured that our agencies have guaranteed funding that they can ramp up with for construction, and they are all doing that. Our planning and funding and oversight role at the RTA means that we can simultaneously often work to both encourage and support the agencies in delivering those projects and spending down on those dollars, but also maintaining a drumbeat for more and future capital funding as we kind of continue to recover from the pandemic. And that means we do a lot of extensive outreach across the region also. The RTA also has directly serviced customers across the region by managing the ADA paratransit certification programs, the reduced and free ride programs that provide access to residents across the entire region. We also do other things like the community planning work that we do a lot of partnership with Cmap, regional planning, coordination on mapping and signage and wayfinding, data collection hubs and things like that. But we've adapted all of these programs during the pandemic and are now thinking ahead towards the strategic changes that really set us up to support the transit network going forward. So next slide, please, just to dive in a little bit as to kind of what the numbers start to look like. I and my board and the staff have spent much of the last 2 years focusing significantly on funding. I think telling you about the challenge that we are facing is important, and I want to walk you through these numbers. But the bottom line is our system is facing, our funding model is too reliant on fares. And like many of our peers across the nation, we have come to an agreement that, the model that is really needs to be much less reliant on fares going forward to really sustain the system on an ongoing basis. And some of the details are presented here on this slide. The region's transit budget is about $3.4 billion. And on the left, you can see some of the assumed revenue sources. The service board's operating revenue, which comes from rider fares, comprises of about 16% of the budget, much of the smaller share of the total revenue than normally due to the revenue losses caused by the pandemic. So those fare revenues have been replaced by federal COVID funding relief, and that compromises now about 19% of the region's budget. And that this is a snapshot of 2022. And on the right, you can see a breakdown of the operating expenses by agency. CTA comprises of just over half of the regional budget, followed by Metra and PACE, suburban bus, and then ADA paratransit service, and then there's a portion of that for debt service that the RTA funds for the region. The RTA as an agency's budget is just over 1% of the entire region's budget. So next slide, please. So as we have looked towards the future, that this reliance on fares, unsustainable. Finance teams from the RTA service boards and Cmap have been working very closely together for months on a 10-year financial plan that will inform the strategic plan that we are currently working on. And that's, Jessica's going to give you a little bit more about that in a few minutes. The finance teams have met bi-weekly since late April, and we have documented their membership, their materials, and their minutes, as well as the findings and recommendations. They're all available on what we're calling our working group hub. If you looked at your agenda digitally, there was a link to all of that material as well. And it's all very much public facing. The work considers multiple factors of our 10-year financial plan, the budget and scenario planning done with stakeholders as part of the COVID recovery work, as well as our current budgets and our ridership projections. It's been supported by transportation financing experts with a lot of deep expertise and help guiding us through some of these conversations. This group, the working group of budget and finance people, developed these figures that Cmap are currently using in its mobility recovery work to understand the deficit we're immediately facing. The estimate that we will see in 2026 is a transit budget deficit of more than $730 million annually. So it's a pretty significant number, which is about 20% of the overall operating budget for the transit system. And I want to underline that this is an annual number, and it assumes that current service levels with no significant changes to schedules, fares, or service. And we think of it as sort of the baseline. The reason for this deficit is essentially twofold. And first is expenses are higher. Service boards assumed an expense growth through this period of about 3.9% per year, and it is a little bit higher than has been experienced over the past decade. In the near term, inflation is certainly going to be the challenge, but labor is the dominant category in this, dominant expense in this category, comprising of about 70% of the current and similarly projected expenses. So attracting and retaining talent, which I think everyone around this table is experiencing in the same thing in their worlds, is continuing to be a challenge and requires that the transit operators provide competitive compensation and benefits. But I think that's sort of the simplest way to think about why the expenses are growing over this coming years. The second reason for the deficit is that fewer people are riding the transit system since they did in 2019. And the conversation with our finance teams and the recovery work that we've been doing and the work that Cmap has been doing, we anticipate that there will be lasting changes to the ways people continue to commute, such that we actually don't expect to get back to or to return to the 2019 levels, at least by 2026. and really any time kind of, I think, over the next decade, if we're really being truly honest with ourselves. Like I said, we have had recovery, and I think that's encouraging, but I think it would be naive of us to plan for, getting back to pre-pandemic numbers. But each agency is currently working tirelessly to bring back those riders, and certainly hope that that continues to happen faster than we've anticipated as our baseline assumptions. But the fact remains, that this is a large number, and it only addresses the system as it operates today, and doesn't consider further improvements that we believe can and should be considered going forward. I also want to make sure that everyone understands that we aren't alone. As I mentioned, we are not unique. Transit operators around the country are in essentially exactly the same situations. I guess there's safety in numbers, but we're doing everything we can, and are actually in some respects even doing some things better and different than some of our colleagues around the country are doing as well. If I leave you with anything else today, or nothing else I guess today, I want to sort of highlight that the funding gap is the major crisis that we are facing. Improvements to the system, though, must go hand in hand in solving that funding gap. And it is going to take all of us working together to address this. And I think we touched on some of those thoughts and ideas, and sort of the comprehensive nature by which we need to tackle a lot of these issues as we go forward. So next slide, and then I'll turn it over to Jessica just to talk a little bit about some of the actual plan work. While we're focused on the coming funding gap, we also know that the transit system doesn't serve riders really as well as it could, and we need to continue to evolve to meet the current and changing needs of our region and our riders. The RTA is committed to that change, and change will meet not just going to meet this at the moment, but change that will help us really prepare for what's coming next in our future. We see, as I think all of you do sitting around this table, what is at stake. And in addition to being essential to so many millions of riders across our region, our transit system has the power to address our economic, our environmental, and our social challenges really at a scale that nothing else can. And we've been working with many stakeholders across the region on this committee as well, and people in this room, to help develop that plan over the coming year. So next slide is just a quick snapshot of sort of the tracks that we have been taking. Our regional strategic planning work has been developed on 3 concurrent tracks: a financial planning track, which I've touched on a little bit, for the financial 10-year plan that I mentioned, alongside a strategic planning track. Both have been informed by an engagement track that ensures transparency, accountability, and mutual learning with a growing body of stakeholders within our region. Throughout this effort, we've developed priority goals and strategies, and a growing coalition ready to work with us to help us achieve those ongoing goals. So we are here today because we hope that you're going to continue to join us in supporting the handful of ideas that this growing coalition believes are ready for advocacy and action beginning in 2023. And we are finishing up this plan soon, working with you and Cmap on implementation. Now I'm going to just ask Jessica Hector-Sue, who is our Director of Planning, to just give you some of the highlights from that planning work to date and get any input from you. So Jessica, take it away. Thanks.
Thank you, Leanne. I think it's on. Thank you, Leanne. Hi, everybody. I am Jessica Hector-Sue. As Leanne said, I'm the Director of Planning at RTA. And with that all as a backdrop that Leanne shared, I'm going to share with you a little bit about what's in the plan that we're developing. So on the next slide, we've really spent a lot of time on engagement over the last year. We've had broad engagement, we've had deep engagement, and in the first 6 months of our engagement, we worked with all of you and with stakeholders across the region to develop this vision, which is safe, reliable, accessible public transportation that connects people to opportunity, advances equity, and combats climate change. And in the next slide, we developed 3 principles. These 3 principles, committed to change, equity, and stewardship, these have guided our work throughout the entire process. You'll see us come back to these again and again. On the next slide, we can talk a little bit about process. So throughout plan development, we've been really intentional, as I said a minute ago, about engaging people across the region and at really checking in with people at every point along the plan development process, at every milestone, to see what people thought. And as I look around the room, I see many of you who've been involved in the process. Your staff have been involved in the process, and it's been really fantastic to work with all of you. Let me tell you about a few ways that people have been able to engage. One way is that we've had stakeholder working groups that involved about 100 people from 70 different organizations. Those groups worked together for 3 months, and they rolled up their sleeves and they tackled some hard questions. These are hard problems. They're not easy to solve. If they were easy to solve, we wouldn't have to be here, but they're very difficult, as Leanne was mentioning. So those groups included RTA, they included Cmap, they included the transit service boards, they included advocates, they included members of the academic community, they included riders. Some folks are experts, some people were just there presenting their views as riders. And they really have shaped the contents of the plan that we're talking about today. In addition to those groups, we also had 2 technical groups who really tackled the 10-year financial plan and got it deep down in the numbers. Leanne shared more about that. And then we had a group talking about capital investments as well. So aside from those stakeholder groups, we also have had a variety of other ways for people to engage. We've had a couple of different, we've posted, by the way, all the materials from those groups on their website if you'd like to look at them. But beyond that, we really also have provided a survey for people to respond to. We've gotten thousands of responses to the surveys. We've been out at events across the region to talk with riders. These actually wonderful pictures are from those where we've really been able to share the challenges we're facing with riders and hear from them about what their desires are for the transit system. A lot of young people, a lot of people who really care deeply about transit who don't do it for a living. So that's really exciting to see. We've also continued to share our work externally as we can with our own board and through our blog and through social media and other ways. So many of you have probably heard too much about the plan. If you haven't, be sure to tune in and continue to follow it. So we're really grateful. This started out as an intent and broad engagement, and it really became an effort in co-creation. So we can truly say that this is not just RTAs. This is really something that we've all worked together to put together. So on the next slide, we're now at the point of sort of talking about action and some practical next steps. We have put together a 2023 agenda for advocacy and action. And again, this came from the stakeholder working groups. This isn't just from RTA. You have the list at your table in a printout, but I'm going to have 2 slides that are going to show the full list here. This list is what we call our advocacy list. This is things that we can't do alone. These are things that we really need stakeholders in the region to partner with us on. The first one at the top and the most important one is to secure increased funding for transit. We have a huge budget gap looming in the distance, and we need to get ready for that. So that's number 1 on the list. There are other things on the list. We want to have a budget that's less reliant on fares. We want to respond to some of the requests from our working groups to change things, but we really need stakeholders like all of you to help us with that. So, we see Cmap as being our number 1 partner on this list. We've talked about that with staff. We really think that Cmap needs to take a lead role in these things, and we look forward to working with staff on that, both in the On2 2050 plan update, or the next plan update rather, and on finishing up the mobility recovery work and leaning into the transit plan next year that staff's going to talk about today. On the next slide, we have what we call is the action list, and these are things that the RT and the service boards can take a lead to implement. They, again, came directly from the working groups, and that included many of you. None of these are easy to accomplish, and none of them are going to happen in a year, but we think in 2023 we can take some steps forward that are really practical and actionable. This includes things like making the system more safer and more secure. It includes adapting to the needs of our riders. It also includes accelerating the transition to zero-emission transit, which is something you were just talking about a minute ago. So lots of things on this list as well. I'm not going to go through them all one by one, but I encourage you to look at them. And on the next slide, we'll pause now and be happy to take any thoughts from you if you have them. We're also meeting with people throughout the region throughout the fall, so if you'd like to sit down and talk in more detail about anything that's on the list or not on the list, please do let us know. We're really at the end of the process now. We're engaging with people, but we're writing the plan. It will go to our board or go out for public comment in December along with our annual budget, and then we will take it to our board in February of 2023 for approval. So Following approval, we will hit the ground running with an advocacy campaign, with a few other very specific actions that we can take. So we're looking forward to partnering with all of you on those next steps and with Cmap as well. So that concludes our presentation. Leanne and I would be happy to take any questions that you have.
David.
I'd just like to commend RTA on their strategic planning process, having personally participated in several of the working groups and technical groups that were mentioned. I can really attest to the robustness and responsiveness of this process. It's not an easy task to ensure that a wide range of input from advocates, implementers, agencies, and folks that you don't always hear from in these processes are really not only heard, but that their feedback, Jessica used the word co-creating the plan, their input has not just been heard and set aside, but is really driving the input to this plan. We at Metro have been engaged in a strategic planning process in parallel with this. Our time frame, our 5-year time frame is similar to that of RTA. Clearly there's interplay between the two, and really because of all the robust input and feedback we heard through this public involvement process, we really curtailed our process so as not to duplicate it, but to hear from, take that input into our public process. Our board is actually considering release of our strategic plan at their board meeting, which is happening across the street concurrently right now. But as we work through this, it's important that all this input can incorporate into our process, and it's really led to what I think is an impressive, comprehensive strategic plan that's being developed for transit for the region. They'll provide the input and direction on these advocacy and action areas for the service board and for the region as we evolve to this new standard that we're all living in.
Anyone else with comments, questions?
This is member Inamudia. I also would like to commend the RTA team. I think that these recommendations are fantastic. As somebody who not only have I taken public transit every day since I was like 10, but I've also worked in land use transit work almost my entire career, and I really love that you've incorporated and mixed up both, because we really do, as we see the shrinkage of ridership, especially as we look at half-empty, parking lots around transit, trying to think, how do we reuse those spaces in order to get ridership up? How do we reimagine our spaces? I think this even came up at our last Cmap board meeting, and so I'm so glad that it is a recommendation here, and thinking less about relying on ridership fares, because throughout the pandemic, as you've mentioned, people of color and low-income people don't have the privilege to drive into the city, right? They have to take public transit. And so thinking about how can we encourage our more privileged co-residents in our cities and in our regions to take public transit, but then also help our low-income residents get to and from where they need to go and have access to the city. So I wholeheartedly really do love these recommendations, and anything that we can do to support, I would be for.
Anyone else?
Thanks. Yeah, I was just going to say that my staff and other members of CTA staff have been involved in the process. It's been an excellent process, very open and transparent. And CTA is very supportive of this effort and of the output that's coming out of this strategic plan. So we're
Kwasniewski, Mr. Kwasniewski.
I just want to say that, over the past couple of years, I think the transit agencies have really kind of bonded together and tried to figure out how we can assist each other and, quite frankly, complement each other on a lot of the services, and really looking at, how we can make things seamless for our riders. And obviously we're competitive trying to chase dollars, but I think at the end of the day, I think we've all realized that we all work well together, and quite frankly, each of our services complement each other. So I think you've seen that through some of the fare structure that we've done over the last year, and also the innovative services I think we're all trying to do thinking outside the bus, if you will, from a pace perspective, that we're really trying to figure, other opportunities of how we can help people get to and from work or wherever they need to go, whether it's with TNCs or any other thing, working cooperatively with other governments as well. So I think we're all committed to change moving forward because quite frankly, I think the services that we had before are not going to be where they were. So I think we need to figure out other opportunities to be able to bring riders back, and I think we need to make it more convenient for them and really kind of listen to a lot of different groups that, quite frankly, are providing the information in some of these studies.
Tom.
Tom Rickard, Kane County. Very important effort, and I commend the RTA for the effort, and I think that this is it's really important vision casting. It's very concerning when you look at that 730 million, and that really doesn't take into account some of the other efforts that we have to make in order to connecting people to opportunity, equity, climate change. That's just for existing services, and so we've got a major effort in front of us, and transit's very important to the region, and this needs to be a priority coming up.
I think we can go ahead and move on to item 6.02.
Thank you.
So thanks to Leanne, thanks to Jessica for your presentation on what you all have been working on. And I think it aligns well with sort of the work that we've been doing that looks at the cascading effects of not only people not getting on transit, but then thinking about what it does to our road system as well, and thinking about sort of the multimodal opportunities that are in front of us. We're all seeing and experiencing the same things right now. We took the last 2 years exploring, validating, and refining what might be enduring due to the pandemic, what might stick around, and I'm going to take a few minutes to describe the work of our mobility recovery project that we've had for the past 2 years. So next slide, thank you. Our goal at the onset of this project was really to think about what the region could look like due to the significant changes in the way people were traveling due to COVID. Over the past few months, we've reviewed policies from around the world. We've analyzed what's already changed due to COVID in employment and housing and where, when, and how people take transit or choose to drive. We've used our travel models as well to understand what these impacts and changes might be as the region continues to recover, to thinking about, again, some of the congestion many of you experienced this morning if you chose to drive. And it wasn't just due to the rain, I'm sure. But thinking about emissions and thinking about the system finances overall. So we've taken all of this and we've developed a series of recommendations, but this work has involved, again, stakeholders from across the region, land use planning, community-based organizations, people who touch transit and transportation on a daily basis, and some people that just think about it in other ways. We've also engaged the Transportation Equity Network throughout this process and held a series of meetings and workshops, again, to continue to hear from voices that we haven't typically centered through our work previously. The words here on this word cloud, I think you'll see the biggest ones are that people need transit and transportation, right? That's the framework. It's, what has changed and what do we need to consider and pursue moving forward? Next step in this process is really how. Can we imagine how our transportation system network can better serve all of the residents of our region? So I want to preview some of the recommendations from the project here. Again, I think we can make some rapid progress on our short-term goals here, and we can really use this moment to reimagine how our transportation network can better serve all of our residents. So I'm going to walk through the recommendations, which really fall into 3 categories here. The first is transit, right? Aligned with what you just heard from Leanne and from Jessica, is that we need to think about how we fund a strong transit network because it's so vital to this region. But we also need to think about what improvements can be made, whether it's fare system integration, which our service boards are working on in a dedicated fashion, but also thinking about new revenues to fund improvements and fill that anticipated shortfall. Safe, active, and sustainable travel throughout the day. We've heard from mayors across the region, from residents across the region, right, that they like getting outside and they enjoyed walking, they enjoy biking. How can we make sure that our communities have opportunities to invest and make those investments that they made maybe temporarily during the pandemic more long-term? And the third is balancing the benefits and impacts of e-commerce and other freight activities across our region. Again, growing e-commerce was sort of on our long-range list of things that was going to happen, but has been accelerated exponentially as we all continue to enjoy ordering things, right, and not having to take the time to go to stores. But it has big impacts on the way our land is used and the way our transportation network is used, and thinking about sort of the benefits of electrification and how we can help mitigate some of the negative externalities of freight through some of these innovations and the fundings that are available to advance these things. So as we wrap up our work on mobility recovery, we're now preparing for what will be a substantial amount of work over the next year. In particular, we're now planning for how we're going to fulfill the state mandate to submit a report in early 2024 on our region's transit system. But before I get into what comes next, I really want to just continue to center us on who it is we're doing this for. It really is about people in our region with which our region wouldn't be successful. It's about getting them to where they need to go faster, reliably, thinking about getting them to healthcare and educational opportunities, to see friends and family. If we're going to deliver transit services that truly serve the people of our region and meet their needs, we do need to make some big, sustainable, bold action and changes and solutions. Fortunately, we're not starting from scratch. Each of our agencies and a lot of the work that our local communities are doing, we can build off of this work, whether it's the City of Chicago Mobility Recovery Plan, the RTA Strategic Plan right now, or the electrification and beneficial plans that each of our transit agencies are working on here. You know, we can draw upon this work both through our 2050 efforts and other analyses that we have on hand already. And we'll be relying on that and more as we develop this report. So this legislation requires us to think about the financial stability of the system and how it can continue to help the region achieve our goals across many dimensions. You know, you'll see on this slide the focus areas that the legislation specifically calls out: financial viability, coordination, and safety. It also calls out racial equity, climate change, and economic development as well, and thinking about how our transit systems and our operators can play an important role in achieving these goals as well. So we are, again, fortunate to be able to draw on the work already being done by RTA and their strategic planning efforts, because they address exactly what this legislative mandate has put forth for us. Many of our recommendations we shared above already speak to some of these topics, but again, others will require a little bit of additional work over this next year, and that's what we're setting out to do here. The next phase of our work really does integrate with that advocacy and action agenda that you saw here. So as we look at the advocacy items, the items in green really do align with they are RTA's advocacy agenda items, align with the bill mandate. We've sort of identified places where we might need to continue to do a little bit of work together to collaborate here. And the items in the action agenda, with some aligning with the bill mandate and then also falling under alignment of our existing work here. So, you know, we have a lot, again, to draw from. We think we can hit the ground running here and help get this report done and leverage the resources and the tools and the reports that everyone else has been working on. The legislation requires us to look to partner with many different organizations, so we're thinking about who that is and who we bring together, sort of 3 tracks here. We'll also be leveraging the work that you all have done, engaging with the public, RTA's work, engaging with the public as well, and connecting with the communities you serve. And last but not least, again, thinking about your continued engagement. In addition to the steering committee that's required in the legislation, we'll be bringing this report to Cmap's board and MPO policy committees, so you're going to hear me talk about this a lot over the next year, is the long and short. Like I mentioned, the report is due at the early January 2024, so we are in the process of scoping and project planning. Again, we're having a discussion today with you all to make sure that you understand the parameters of what we've been tasked to do by the General Assembly. Early next year, we'll convene that steering committee as defined in the legislation, but continue to bring this as an agenda item to each of our board and MPO meetings as well. All right. So the steering committee approach, I just wanted to give you some insights on this, but I know that we have a couple other things on our agenda, so I won't belabor the point here. But, you know, we really want the steering committee members to think about this in sort of three tracks, right? The system we want, which has been laid out in numerous plans from across the region. How do we pay for it? You know, and thinking about the improvements to the system, they're not usually free, they cost money. And I think, again, we have some great tools in our toolkit for thinking about it, but there might be some innovative things that we could also be bringing to the table here, and making sure that the public understands. But thinking about other things in addition to the sales tax, like congestion pricing or changes to state funding programs as well. And then the third line of work is really how to implement it. You know, thinking about how we as the public sector collaborate to provide mobility options to residents. The legislation also calls out things like regional fare systems, but essentially that work stream will really be about how we make these options work financially and logistically. So, I know we've talked a lot, and I've heard from many of you too, so we can take this discussion offline here a little bit, but if the questions pop up, I think, you know, again, we'd be interested in hearing from you on topics you think will be especially important for us to focus on, or things where we might not want to spend as much time. Again, we know each of your organizations are engaging with the public about their needs. I don't want to recreate the wheel here, so how can we use what you all have been doing and present that to the General Assembly in a meaningful way? And then again, you know, how can we make this most helpful to you as well? We have been tasked with this by the General Assembly members, but you know, we recognize that this is an opportunity for us to put forth our region's needs at the State House in a meaningful way where they can help us support and take action. So those are my concluding thoughts here. Over the next couple months for the Mobility Recovery Project, we'll be wrapping that up again and have that out in the next month, and then we'll spend the rest of the year refining the scope and approach for this General Assembly report. Thoughts or questions for me on the process? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I had to step out briefly there, and so you may have already addressed this. So this report that's to the General Assembly, is this working in conjunction, what we just heard with RTA?
Yes.
So I think this gives us a real opportunity to kind of look at what, and I think Aaron alluded to it a little bit about what transit operations we really want. And I think that's where, you know, some of that focus really needs to be. And I think obviously we've got financial constraints, but I think we should be looking kind of beyond that a little bit to make sure that, you know, we're looking at what kind of a system we want many years from now. So, and if that's going to rely on some other sources of revenue or whatever, then I think that needs to be kind of considered in that process. So, you know, I think all the agencies are excited about kind of working with Cmap and coming up with some of those different ideas that, quite frankly, aren't in our regular operations right now. But if we look at things and figure out, you know, collectively how we might be able to accomplish it, you know, then we can figure out the dollar aspect of it as well. So I'm not talking about pie in the sky. I'm just saying let's really look at what we really want in a transit agencies moving forward.
Thanks. Mike?
Aaron, I'll just say this is a large and complex task and a huge undertaking that you guys are jumping into here. And I'll just pledge on my organization's behalf that we'll be working with you on it as we go forward. I appreciate what you guys have done so far, and we have a long ways to go.
Thanks.
Aaron, this is Chris Snyder.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, how are you? Just a couple things. I know DuPage has been actively engaged in this process, so I just want to identify a couple of things. When we started out, one of the things we were seeing in DuPage is kind of an evolving emergent market, especially warehousing, logistics in different parts. And so reading the memo, you know, there were some references to increasing those opportunities to maybe tap that targeted employment group. So hopefully look forward to working collaboratively with Cmap on that. The other thing with regard to, there is a reference to possibly road usage dollars for a potential funding source. I also want to talk about the partnership opportunities. There's a lot of things we do on our transportation networks that are transit supportive, sidewalks, paths, signal priority, or at least signal interconnects. And so as we look forward to either reimagining the system or expanding services, especially for some of those more local trips, that we don't forget about the partnerships between the road agencies and the transit agencies to achieve the same goals.
Thanks, Chris. Kevin?
Yeah, I was just curious. It seems like one of the first steps you have is to create the steering committee, and I was just wondering what your thoughts are around that, or how that's going to go about.
So the legislation dictates have business, civic, labor, environment, and probably a couple other groups that I'm forgetting. Right now, the team is working through thoughts on what that should look like. I think, again, we want people who are going to be champions of this. We want people who have experience in Springfield understanding how to make these things work and how to, again, make this report meaningful for the General Assembly. We've also been thinking about major employers across the region, people who fundamentally need their individual employees to get to places across the region. So sort of in that vein, but we're open to ideas and suggestions if you have any, but again, there's some stipulations in the legislation that require the makeup.
As you well know, our 7 counties in the city are about to embark on a new regional economic development partnership, and that this seems like this could fit right in with some of that effort. Just saying the obvious out loud.
No, that's actually a really great suggestion. You're right. We should leverage the work that we've done with the county EDOs on this as well. Okay. Thank you very much for your time. To move on here and find my place, I'm going to turn it over to John Donovan from Federal Highways.
Hello, good morning, and thank you. It's my pleasure to be able to spend a couple quick minutes. I appreciate you guys hanging in there, getting to the end of a long but important meeting here, to be able to present to the Policy Committee and the Board on the findings of the U.S. Department of Transportation Planning Certification Review. I'm presenting on behalf of our Acting Illinois Division Administrator, David Snyder, also the Federal Transit Administration Regional Administrator, Kelly Brookins. I'd also like to recognize online we have Tony Greep, kind of my partner in crime in putting the review together. Just like to thank him again for the great work he's contributed to this effort. In the room we also have John Paul Kohler. Many of you have worked with him through the years, our excellent Planning and Program Development Manager. I'd also like to introduce Chris Hall, who's our new Planning Environment Right-of-Way Team Leader. If you have the opportunity to meet him afterwards, we're very excited about his efforts and the way he's going to help advance our work moving forward. So again, we're here because these reviews are required every 4 years to certify the planning process. Again, that action has occurred. We typically have a report that follows up with that action. That report will still be released here in the next few weeks, but wanted to provide you an opportunity for a little discussion and just a quick look at our findings. Again, in the last 4 years, kind of a lot's happened. I don't think we need to continue to beat on the COVID horse and the pandemic and all the chaos and all the impacts it's had on the planning process here. Again, planning processes tend to work well when they're predictable, incremental. A pandemic doesn't allow that to be the case. Also, during this 4-year time period, we've had the passage of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Feds we commonly refer to as the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. But again, we'd like to think of that as kind of a good level of chaos. Historic levels of investment, but again, also provides historic responsibilities to implement programs. Easier said than done. It'd be remiss if I also didn't mention the historic investment at the state level from the Rebuild Illinois Capital Program. It's easy to just focus on what the federal government's done, but the state's also made a significant effort and contribution commitment to infrastructure. So kind of all within that context, we're conducting this review. Through this process, we issue a lot of commendations, a lot of recommendations. I'll just hit a couple of those super quick. open floor for some discussion. I should emphasize, though, that the review itself over the previous 4 years is essentially the work prior to the IIJA, but it's impossible to discuss some of these issues that we're facing without kind of the eye towards the future. I think it's important to note the IIJA also has a fair amount of planning emphasis baked into it. Whether you're talking about electric vehicles or climate resiliency or safe streets, there are either requirements or incentives looking for the planning process to step up. I think Executive Director Alleman also started the meeting some of her comments about our previous division administrator, talking about competing for discretionary funds and how the regional approach is necessary to really put yourself in good position. But again, there is an emphasis on discretionary funds and competition. And again, a lot of technical processes are held to try to determine how a proposal meets the various criteria or the priorities of a program. But oftentimes we look at the planning elements of it. How is it addressed at the regional level to answer the questions of why is this important? And why is this a priority versus all the other priorities that are coming into, that it's competing with? So with that said, let's jump right into some of the commendations. A lot of the great work that's already been presented today, all the work that's gone forward with the 2040 update. It's easy just to take a quick vote on things this morning, but the mountains of work that's gone into the technical analysis has been substantial. You can say the exact same thing about the TIP work and the conformity work. Again, highly technical and complex processes that come before you, and it looks easy, and that's a sign of the great work that's been done leading up to this point. Referencing public engagement, there's been a lot of work. It would have been easy the last 4 years, or as a pandemic hits and everyone heads home, to say, hey, there's only so much we can do. We can't really engage the public the way we have before. And again, the region did need to be creative. The planning process did need to be creative. But throughout all these important efforts we've been talking about today, there has been considerable engagement with local governments, with transportation agencies, with the general public. Again, there's been great work going on to get that done. The mobility recovery work that we just heard about, again, also easy. Would have been easy to just sit back and say, hey, transit ridership is what it is. We'll take a look at 5-10 years and see how we can recover from something that we don't have any blueprints on how to address this. Same thing with the speed and safety impacts that we saw on the roadway during the pandemic. It'd be easy to just sit back and say, well, we'll deal with this when we have more data, or when we have more time, or when we have more perspective. But again, this region's kind of jumped into the work and said, how can we start addressing things? What do we need to do quickly? This region also advancing a regional transportation vulnerability assessment, conducted several workshops. Again, a lot of good work being done, positioned the region for success in those programs. In response to some of the concerns expressed throughout the committee structure and the MPO, the region has responded very strongly with the safety action agenda. I'd like to highlight that. A very strong effort in refocusing and reprioritizing our efforts to provide a safe systems approach to the challenges we face on our roadways. With that, maybe just jump into a few recommendations super quick. Finish commendations with safety. I'll start with the safety recommendation. For the last several years, this region's adopted aspirational targets for safety performance. Now is probably the time to relook at those. Is that target setting process getting the results that are advancing the goals we have? How do we approach those? We've discussed a lot the last couple of years, and not so much today, but efforts related to the Americans with Disabilities Act and transition planning in Title II of the ADA. Again, throughout these discussions, the region's already responded very strong and very quickly, putting together a strategy to advance those equity concerns for some of our most vulnerable system users. Various freight programs, we look at that. We're going to encourage additional regional and state coordination to identify needs and projects. Despite the fact that we obviously identify freight as a significant need in this region. We do have federal programs with obligated balances that have necessitated transfers. It's difficult to get the right projects ready to go. How can we approach those project development processes to be more efficient and effective in getting these needed projects advanced? Again, those are some of the bigger policy kind of issues, a lot of technical level recommendations as well throughout the review, whether it's technical components, updating agreements to be consistent in advance of the IIJA, updating the 2018 agreement between Cmap, IDOT, the service board's RTA for data collection and dissemination. We're going to encourage the MPO to look at the Unified Work Program Committee, work that's already underway. How can this committee and other subcommittees and other committees contributing to this process, how can they contribute to identifying the needs of the planning process? With that, I'll conclude the formal remarks. I'd just like to thank again the staff and the leadership of the agencies here. Again, excellent work being done in the region. Again, that finding has been issued, a certified finding has been issued. The report will be released here shortly. But again, a lot of great work, and again, I thank Tony Greep from the FTA on the review itself, but again, the leadership and the work of the staffs from your agencies is what continues to make this a great region to work in. So with that, be happy to try to address any questions or concerns.
John, let me say that working with you and our partners at FTA, I know that the team at the Illinois Division Office is just really helpful to us in so many different ways, and so we appreciated the time everyone put in to conduct the evaluation. It wasn't insignificant. Thanks to our partners also for being there and sharing about the work that we're doing jointly, specifically, RTA's work as well. So also, I was remiss in recognizing that David Snyder, this is your first meeting at the MPO, so we welcome you here and hope to see you back as well. Any other questions for John?
Thanks
Thank
again.
you, John.
So on to 7.0, other business. Is there any other business before the Cmap board? I think Leanne will touch you if you want to go on MPO. Then Leanne.
Would this be the right time to say? Just wanted to say a couple things before I depart. Would this be the time to do that? Yeah. So for those of you that I haven't met, I'm Scott Greider. I'm the chairman of the Kendall County Board, and I've been on this committee in some fashion for the last 10 years. And when I came on it in 2012 or so, we were the fastest growing county in the state per capita, and as I leave, we are once again still the fastest growing county in the state per capita. So with that comes a multitude of transportation issues. And we came in back then with the Ileana Parkway, not to bring up, but I don't see anybody cringing here, but that was one of the first things that we talked about. And now we went through a global pandemic that really has changed the way people commute. And in fact, one of my towns, the one I live in, is Oswego, and was named by Wire magazine as one of the best places to work from home in the country. And so that has changed things dramatically as well, and something for us to plan. I always look at the Chicagoland region as kind of being more than just the heartbeat of Illinois or the heartbeat of even the Midwest, but it's the heartbeat of the nation that comes through here. And the work that goes on around this table that all of you do, not just for this committee, but in your individual capacities, is so critical to all that we do, really, on a national basis. It has great and far-ranging impact. So I just want to say it's been my pleasure to be here and to serve and to meet and get to know a lot of you. See a lot of familiar faces, a lot of new faces, but it's my pleasure, and just keep up the good work here. It's important stuff. So thank you.
Thanks, Scott. And I want to echo Leanne in thanking you for your service, not only to your community, but to the region as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Scott, for those comments too. Any other business to come before the MPO Policy Committee?
Then I'd like to move on to 8.0, public comment. Are there any comments from the public? First, we're going to take any in-person comments. Oh, so then we'll move on to any virtual comments.
Garland Armstrong. Garland, are you there? Garland? I'll just note while we're waiting for Garland to see if we can get him unmuted, that we received no written comments.
Can you hear me?
Yep, now we can hear you, Garland.
All right. How you doing, everybody? It's Garland Armstrong from Des Moines, Iowa, along with my wife. I just would like to say kudos to everybody for y'all doing everything to make sure that this goes well, and especially with the ADA, to hear a voice and getting more sidewalks and access to it and other things too, and make sure that we get all the safety we need, because safety, especially for the disability, is always a top priority, especially when there's not enough sidewalks. And I just wanted to make sure to update, did y'all make sure about the sidewalk in Tinley Park by 159th Street and Oak Park Avenue when we was living a couple of years ago, that there was no sidewalk? And I would like to know, have they extended the sidewalk there? Because every time when me and Heather get off the bus, going there like either to the church or going across the street, there's not enough sidewalks. So I just would like to know the progress of it. Has it been updated, or is it still going on? Because when we come back again, we would like to see if they finally did it or not, because we haven't had any response or nothing.
We can certainly check in with the village and look at that location and follow up with you, Garland.
All right, that's great. And just wanted to say, y'all are doing an awesome job, and way to go over there at Chicago Union Station, because you rocked it, everybody. And just would like to say kudos to y'all. And Leanne, you certainly rocked it for the MPO, and I will still be able to watch you for the RTA, and you keep on going and make sure that the Chicagoland area will never suffer a financial loss for transit, because that is our backblood, and we're going to keep on doing it. And that's for vacation visitors. When we come back again, we want to make sure that if you need any suggestions from us, just call me, and I can help y'all along the way down the road.
Thank you, Garland. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Garland. It does
All
look
right.
like we have one other individual. Say hello to Heather for us. We do have one other individual. Sam Vagani has raised their hand.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Sam Vagani, Legacy Lead AP, U.S. Green Building Council. Thank you for this opportunity in front of the Cmap board to discuss the Cmap's 2050 plan. From what I believe as an experienced Legacy Lead AP, I think a great plan would be a synergistic involvement with the municipalities of the greater Chicagoland area for more LEED certified green building policies, as well as commitments towards the LEED for Cities and Communities program, which the LEED for Cities and Communities program started out great with the City of Chicago in 2018. And there has been, I know, a certification that has been committed by Kane County, as well as the city of Evanston. I believe that urban plan structure, being the #1 rated urban plan structure in America for clean cities, is a great plan to adopt metropolitan-wide altogether. Okay, and I could provide more of this information to Cmap and any other municipalities that would be interested.
Thank you, Sam. We'll be sure to follow up. If you could drop your email in the chat, that'd be helpful.
Thank you.
Also, looks like we have Kyle Lucas who raised their hand as well.
Hi there. Yes, thank you. I just wanted to briefly comment on, I really like that we hear a lot from your agencies talking about taking climate action seriously, and that you're talking about the need to get people out of their cars and onto transit, onto buses, onto trains, and to create communities that are more walkable and easier to access, different services within their communities. But you say a lot of these things and then vote on things that go in the other direction. So today you voted on a plan that will expand Illinois roadways by 300 miles. And I think that it says a lot to your actual values, that your actions are going in the opposite direction of your words. We need to see greater accountability from Cmap and from the other agencies that are involved in this planning process to actually take your words and turn them into action. If you really believe that we need to get people onto transit in order to address our climate goals and to improve mobility in the region, then you need to invest in transit. They're spending an equal amount on roadways as you are in transit, and it needs to be a different paradigm. We need to increase transit funding, and we need to decrease road funding in order to actually address our climate goals and to address our mobility goals in the region. So I would really like to see more action on that, and instead of just lip service.
Thank you, Kyle. Blanca, any other public raising their hand to speak? No. All right.
Okay, thank you. And our next meeting of the Cmap board is scheduled for Wednesday, November 9th in 2022.
Apologies, we do have somebody who just said they want to speak. Kwame?
Okay. We'll recognize the next individual, Kwame.
Hello, sorry, I guess I submitted my request very late. But no, this is just a general, it's comment and question. Just in regards to transit in general, I was wondering for the overall plan, what would be the goal to, I guess, increase transit service? Because a lot of people make great comments about how we want to increase passenger ridership. But it feels like one reason ridership did go down was because a lot of the service was cut during the pandemic, which was understandable because of, well, the pandemic. But now since we're in recovery, a lot of that service still has a return. A lot of PACE bus routes around the area I lived have been, well, canceled because of low ridership. And I also I'm kind of curious if there's any plans to basically change the scheduling of the routes, because I'll use the Metro Electric as an example. Even though peak hours haven't recovered, 1 hour that has recovered really well in the Metro Electric would be the the weekend service. So I'm just curious about how these adjustments from the pandemic, whether it's returning service or just adjusting the hours that the service is provided, could be incorporated into the plan.
Hi, Kwame. This is Leanne Redden with the RTA. I'll just quickly respond. If you can also put your email in the chat, we could provide you with a more thorough response, because it's not a one-size-fits-all across the three operators. But service is coming back across. CTA never actually really cut service, and Metro and PACE have been bringing back service very strategically. So we could provide you with a lot more information. We'd also like to keep you, encourage you to stay engaged with our conversations as we go forward in further finalizing our plan, as well as the rest of the work that we've talked about today.
Thank you. Blanca, anybody else? Okay, nobody else. So,
Right. So again, the Cmap board will be meeting Wednesday, November 9th in 2022.
And the next MPO Policy Committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, January 12, 2023.
So I will entertain a motion from the Cmap board to adjourn. If you could.
So moved, Matt Walsh.
Second, no.
By voice of aye.
Aye.
And I will look for a similar motion to adjourn the MPO meeting. First and a second.
Move Metro Kralik.
One, Dave Kralik from Metro, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you so much. Just a quick note that if you would like, we have Amtrak staff here who are available to give a tour of Union Station, talk a little bit about the mega grant application. Derek James is over there, and you can go ahead and say hello to him, and he'd be happy to show you around. Thank you so much to our Amtrak partners and everyone. Yeah, and Mark.
So it's lunchtime. Can I take you to lunch?